Okay, I'm spitting in my cowgirl boots, and today I'm telling the tale of the Wild Swans, which is the Hans Christian Andersen version of a very common story where boys get turned into birds and they have to be saved by their sister with magical clothing. In this version, there are 11 of those boys and one little girl, and they are all children of the king, and they're perfect in every way and beautiful and sweet and well behaved. Even the boys, yeah. And then the king gets married, takes a new queen, and so the children have a stepmother. And guess what? She's evil. Because all stepmothers are evil in fairy tales. It's like a rule. And the stepmother doesn't like the fact that there are 12 children running around in this castle, and she proceeds to plan ways to get rid of them. First thing she does is she takes the little girl, she sends her off to live with peasants in the village. And once the little girl is out of the way, she goes to work on the king about these damn boys. She pours poison into his ear to turn his heart against his sons. I'm sure she says things like, "Oh my God, there are 12 of them, and have you noticed that they're so noisy? They're so loud. There's never any peace and quiet in this castle. And you know what? They're kind of dirty and smelly. And have you seen how much they eat?" Uh, After enough of that, the king decides, you know what? You're right. I can't stand these boys. They're too much trouble. Banish them. And with them banished, the evil stepmother says, "Yeah, I'll take care of that." So she calls the boys to her and she curses them. She curses them to be away with you, fly away like big noisy birds. And because she's evil, that's more than just a strange thing to say. They actually turn into swans, all 11 of them, and fly away. And that's how she gets rid of the boys. Now, a few years later, the little girl is grown up, and she's 15 or 16, and I suppose that means that she's ready to be married off to someone. So she's called back from the village and the peasants to live in the castle. And the queen sets right to work trying to get rid of her with spells and curses, and there's like evil toads, but it doesn't work. Nothing works because she's perfect and can't be cursed. But she does know that she's not wanted, so she runs away all on her own. And she's wandering around the forest, and then she comes to the edge of the kingdom, and she's plopped down on the beach at the sea, and she's crying. And all of a sudden, she's surrounded by these 11 huge swans. And as the sun sets and it becomes night, these big giant swans turn into her brothers. Because in this version of the story, they're swans by day and men by night. So they hug and they kiss and they cry, and it's, "Oh my God, what happened to you?" And it's that evil stepmother. She's the one who did this. Well, we're never going back there. No, the little girl says, "Well, then I'm never going home." Well, the brothers say, "Good, we'll take you with us." So they spend all night making a big giant net. And in the day, when they turn into swans, each swan takes up a piece of this net in their little swan feet, and they pick up the net with the girl in it and they fly her back across the sea to live with her in their cave. She's very grateful to be with her brothers. She misses them. It's totally better than living with an evil stepmother. But she'd like to find a way to relieve their curse, and so she prays to God for an answer and then promptly falls asleep. And in her dreams, she's visited by an old woman that she knows is a fairy. And the old fairy, godmother, that's where that comes from, tells her, "Oh, yeah, there's totally a way to relieve that curse on your brothers, but you're not going to like it, girl. It ain't easy. You sure you want to know? Are you sure?" Okay, well, the first thing you have to do is stop talking for 7 years. Not a word, not a peep, not an utterance, nothing. And if you say anything in the next 7 years, your brothers will fall down dead, all of them. She says, "Okay, I can do that." Well, that ain't all. You have to make them shirts, all 11 of them. And you only have 7 years to do it. 11 shirts in 7 years. And that was a challenge. Oh my God, how long did it take to make clothes back then? You know? Well, she says, "I can do that." "Yeah, but you have to make them out of stinging nettle, which you collect with your bare hands. And you have to do everything. You have to spin it and weave it and make these shirts." And in some stories, she's a weaver. In some stories, she's a knitter. And she says, yeah, I can do that too. I'm on it. We're going to break this swan thing. All right, good luck. So she wakes up and she thanks God. And she immediately goes to work collecting stinging nettle, which is not easy. And her hands burn and turn red and swell up and blister and bleed, and she doesn't stop. She collects all the stinging nettle from around the cave, and then, this is a quote from the story, stomps on them with her bare feet to turn them into flax. I've never heard of redding by stomping on with your bare feet. But that's what she does. And when the brothers come back, they see what she has done, and they ask her, why are you doing this to yourself? What's wrong with your hands, and why aren't you talking? But after a while, the brothers figure it out, that this is how she is going to relieve them of their curse, and they hug her and kiss her and thank her and shower her with praise. So she keeps at it every day. No talking, playing with the stinging nettle, having burnt, blistery hands, and making shirts. And enough time goes by that she is discovered by huntsmen from the castle. Huntsmen with their big giant dogs, and they come across this weird little girl who won't talk and plays with stinging nettle. And after trying to figure out who she is and what she's doing, and not succeeding because she won't talk, they collect her and her nettle and her half-finished shirts, and they take her to the king. Because if you're the king, I guess it's your job to deal with weirdos that live in the woods. And the king asks her who she is and what she's doing and why she's living in the woods in every language that he knows, and she doesn't answer him. And guess what? He falls in love with her. Of course he falls in love with her. She's beautiful and perfect and wonderful and very mysterious because she's not talking, and all she does is play with her stinging nettle. He marries her, and now she is the queen. And it's very specific about how she spends her nights with the king in his bedroom, and she spends her days in her own room making these nettle shirts. After a while, actually not after a while, pretty darn quick, she runs out of nettle from that she had collected around the cave, and she has to go out and get more. So she sneaks out at night to find nettle, which is growing in the church graveyard. And this is where the story gets weird. Yes, it wasn't weird before, but it's weird now. In the graveyard, there are vampires. That's what it calls them in the story. And they are skinny and ugly and naked. And they break into coffins and eat the dead. Sound more like ghouls, right? That's what I'm going to call them. Ghouls. So she has to avoid the ghouls. She does that by praying to God to keep her safe while collecting the nettle. And it works. So every night after that, she goes out and frolics around with the ghouls and collects her nettle and comes back in the day and works on her shirts. Well, it doesn't take long before people start to notice, and they tell the archbishop, who gets up one night and watches her leave the castle and watches her go to the graveyard and watches her frolic around and mess with these ghouls. And that's enough for him. I mean, she already doesn't talk, and all she does is play with nettle and make these weird shirts, and now messing around with ghouls that eat dead people. Yeah, you're a witch, girl. You're evil. So he brings charges against her to the king, and she's arrested and put into a tiny little cell and put on trial for witchcraft. It doesn't take much to convince the people that she is a witch. So she's stuck in her cell, condemned to die, burned at the stake, and she can't get any nettle, so she prays to God, and he sends her a bunch of mice, field mice, and they go out at night and collect the nettle for her. And so she keeps working on her shirts, and time is running out because all of a sudden 7 years have gone by, and she has to finish the last shirt, and it's not done. And they collect her one morning, and they're dragging her off to be burned at the stake. And so she grabs her nettle shirts, and her brothers come, and they fly all around her, and she throws the shirts up to them, all 10 of them, and then the 11th that is half finished. And as soon as the shirts fall on the swans, they turn back into men, all except for the youngest with his half-finished shirt. He's missing a sleeve, and he turns into a man with a swan's wing. Can you imagine how impressive that must have been? And even better, now she can finally talk. With all of her brothers standing around her and her voice back, she explains to everyone, including the king and the archbishop, exactly what had been going on and all about this evil stepmother and way back when and the curse and the fairy and how she had to make these shirts and she couldn't talk and yada yada. And everyone loves her and she's beautiful and she's perfect and her brothers surround her and hug her and the king brings her flowers and they have a big wedding procession all the way back to the castle and the end all is well. Don't ask me what happened with the little brother that has a swan's wing for the rest of his life. Always kind of interested in what happened to him. But in the story, the end. Now, making stuff out of stinging nettle is a real thing. People did that. Before cotton was popular, nettle, flax, hemp, these were all the plant fibers that people spun with. Now, of course, no one went out and collected nettle with their bare hands. If they were either really stupid or really tough, because nettle has all of its leaves are covered in these little tiny spines. Each spine is reinforced by the plant with silica, so it's like a glass needle, and very delicate. All you have to do is brush up against them, and those needles come right off and embed in your skin. And every one of those needles contains venom. Now, when I was growing up, we were always told that they contained formic acid, which is the same thing as in an ant bite, but it turns out that's not true. It has 4 different chemicals, all of which have these unpronounceable names. You'll have to look it up. I can't remember what they are. But they do hurt and they do burn. But of course, all you have to do in real life is wear heavy gloves, long sleeve shirts. You can collect all the nettle you want, strip off the leaves, and then it's just like flax. I've never heard of stomping on it with your feet, but if you soak them in water for a few days up to a week and come back, then you take the stalks and break them apart and get the pith, the woody part in the center out, and take the outer stem and break it apart and card it, comb it, turn it into fibers, and spin it, and then you can knit it or weave it or do whatever you want. There's still nettle production, commercial nettle production in parts of Russia and Tibet. And I do remember reading that at one point in one of the world wars, and I want to say it was the first one, but I'm not entirely sure, the Germans ran out of cotton and went back to nettle cloth to make their uniforms. Nettle is very common. It grows all over the world in almost every temperate climate. And there's a push today. It's not very popular, but there's a push today to start collecting and using nettle fibers as a form of sustainable cloth because nettle can grow in an urban environment. It's probably growing out by the roadsides of wherever you live right now. If you want, you can look it up, and then I think harvest time is in the fall. But don't do it with your bare hands. After all, if you don't have brothers that are cursed to be birds, and you don't have a fairy godmother telling you what to do, you don't have to play with the nettle with your bare hands or stomp on it with your bare feet or any of that other craziness. You can just collect it in the normal way and give it a try. So there you go. That's the tale of the wild swans, and I hope you like it. And as you can see, I have a lot more of this stuff to spin, so I better get to it. Till next time.